Welcome to Unorganized Thought, the podcast where we finally have...
What?
You're just kind of staring off
I know,
at its face there.
I thought it would be funny.
The podcast where we finally have new content to talk about.
Yeah, I was going to mention that, is that it's been months, possibly even a year, with nothing to talk about. And then something came out and we watched it all in one day. And now it's gone again.
Yeah.
So very sad.
Back to the...
This is what happens when you don't give us stuff. I'm looking at you, Disney.
Back to the great content famine of 2020.
Yeah.
It's just a year of bigger problems than that.
Yeah.
But just to sprinkle it on top.
Nothing to talk about on my little podcast.
We are referring to Umbrella Academy Season 2.
Dose.
I guess 2.
Not for
Not 4. I held up both my fingers if this ever comes out as on audio only format.
Yeah, even though we said last time, like a month ago on the last podcast,
We're waiting for the optimum opportunity. Anyways, let's get into it.
Yeah, we need to get into it.
We're talking about Umbrella Academy Season 2. We talked about the first season very briefly when Tegan was on, but he hadn't seen it, so we just kind of mentioned it. We liked the first season.
Yeah, and
Kieran's
I'm someone who's followed the series before it was a series. Like, I read the comics back, I think, when Dallas came out. And so, like, I've been a fan of it. And so, watching the first season through the first time, like, I knew a lot of the stuff that was going on. Even this season, there was some connecting things that I knew what was going on. But it instead, and I don't really know why I thought of this. I think I may have actually said this in the last time we talked about it, is that for some reason I expected it to be more like when a book is adapted, where it's like, oh, this is the story we're following and this is what we're doing. And I think the only reason I did that is because the 2 volumes at the time that were out, and now there's 3, that's it, you know? Like, X-Men, there's thousands of comics and stories that you can choose from, you know? And so I wasn't thinking about it so much as a comic book adaptation, more of like, this is a story that exists, they're going to make that into a show, which it was loosely adapted, kind of. It was more of the same way they did Civil War, you know? It's Captain America and Iron Man are fighting, but this is the universe that we have on screen versus this is what's in the comic books.
Exactly.
And that's kind of what Umbrella Academy more was in the first season. I don't really know why I'm explaining it, because I'm guessing if you're watching this, you've seen it. But if you haven't read the comic books, that's kind of the correlation.
Yeah, and so after watching the first season, I read the first comic. I didn't continue on through. And I personally, and now here's some controversy
alert
happening.
That's gonna be. I have to make that now.
Is that I liked the show better.
Yeah.
And so
that's a dangerous thing to say.
It is. It really is. And I'm not trying to discredit the comics in any way, because they are excellent at creating this sort of this universe, these characters, and the only thing that kind of didn't sell it for me is story.
Yeah.
And like, whenever I watch something, I watch it almost first and foremost, the make or break thing for me is story, you know? And so when this comic with amazing art, amazing characters, kind of has a lackluster, like, narrative, it's kind of hard for me, especially a narrative that particularly makes me upset.
Yeah, it's kind of got that subversive
exactly
twist on it.
And so, like, it feels a bit to me, the ending decision that is made is sort of just this very surprising, unexpected thing that I hate. I hate the decision that was made. Yeah. It makes me upset, and I don't think that it's a good ending to a story. It's unfair, and it doesn't teach a lesson. And so for that reason, after I read it, I was like, well, I like the show way better.
Yeah.
Simply because of that, you know?
Yeah.
Simply because it explores some of the characters in a bit more of an effective way.
Mm-hmm.
The first comic, at least, is a little bit vague almost all of the time.
Yeah.
And, you know, for that reason, I enjoyed the story of the show quite a bit better.
Yeah, and I do think I agree with that. You know, like I like the comics and everything, but the more I've kind of watched the show and like enjoyed it, is like it just does kind of come down to that the story seems better, and honestly, I think part of it is just that they have more time to flesh everything out. They have real world characters to that you can relate to more so than in the books, where it's just kind of like the comic books to me kind of feel very much like this is the world we're in, this is what's going on, and we're just kind of rolling with it, you know. You just gotta accept what's going on in the universe, and it's fine, you know. Like again, like you said, I'll never discredit it, it's great, but like the show is very good, and I think that it took a very good universe and made it better, basically.
Yeah, and I think that the show and the comics are just kind of very, very different entities. And like the first season, like you said, very kind of loosely followed the story that happened, and just kind of put it into a more grounded world with more grounded characters. And the same is somewhat true for the second season, which expands more off the show than it does off the books. There are still lots of, well, like there's still the bare bones aspects of the comics, but what they went forward with was the show that they created, which is very much different. It's a big departure from the comics. Like I don't think that it's really a situation where you can sit down and say, oh, this one is better and this one is worse. Even though I say I prefer the story better, it's just
personal preference.
It's personal preference, and they're so different that it's hard to say that.
Yeah,
you know?
and the one thing is that if you are a diehard comic book fan, you may not like the show, you know? Like I kind of think we had this conversation with Tegan, is just like he is very into the comics and he's not super into the whole superhero television and movie scene. And so I don't think that maybe it would be for someone like him so much, but like I'm open to both. I love comic books, I love superhero media, you know, and so it wasn't a hard transition for me. I was excited to see the characters that I liked adapted into TV, and I just kind of accepted that, well, it's a different universe. We're not following the books beat by beat. And so, yeah, like you said, it just, the second season built off of that. And so I think we shall talk about the second season now, because that's what we're here to do.
And so, I don't think we're going to, I sort of avoided spoiling things just then because it was in regards to the comic books. And so from now on, though, I don't think we're going to
we'll just talk about
careful.
the second season.
We're going to talk about the second
season. But it will
season.
have spoilers.
There's probably going to be spoilers involved.
But
if
you haven't seen it yet, if you haven't watched either season, we are going to have a review up on the channel. If it's out before this, click up here. I think it's on my side. You'll be able to check that out there. If it's not out yet, it'll be out soon.
And it'll probably be spoiler free. If not, there will be a section of it that is. And so this second season overall, I enjoyed it. You know, it was a show that I was just sort of able to sit down and enjoy. Partially because, you know, I didn't really have that big of expectations.
We've been disappointed quite a bit by a lot of things. And so I set my expectations low, you know, because it just seems like every time we're like excited about something, we set ourselves up to fail. And so I think that's kind of what Aiden's referring to and how he kind of felt. But honestly, I think I was pleasantly surprised. I was, not to say that I loved everything in the second season, but for the most part, it took what they did in the first season and continued and ran with it, and it was overall pretty great.
Yeah, exactly. I was skeptical. I was skeptical, particularly because the first season was a pretty big departure from the comics, and I wasn't sure that they would have enough to carry it on when it looked like they were departing even further. And so I was a little bit concerned about that, because when it came down to it, these weren't characters that they created, but they did a good thing
They made them
in
their own.
making them their own and continuing them that way.
Yeah.
And they didn't steal them and, claim a certain direction that was wrong or
Or like
bad.
take someone else's characters and throw them in the garbage.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so they kind of they did good work. It's again different from the comics, but
Yeah,
they
but,
continued the show that they adapted
made.
and have now
the thing is
created.
they the whole time they've been in cahoots. They've been working with the original creators, in all the stuff you see, like that Gerard and Gabriel Ba, like they always say this, like this is based off this and stuff, and Gerard's always posting about it, and it seems like they have good connections with all those guys. Like I know that at least Aidan Gallagher talked about how he's read the comics and stuff, and I know that Gerard basically went through and did a bunch of posts talking about, I really like what they did with this in the show. I'd like to see them continue with this, and basically gave his thought, and it seemed like he really liked it,
And it's almost good sometimes to do such a departure, because then, it's hard to compare the two, like we said. And so, like,
I'd almost prefer that sometimes.
Yeah, and that it is such a different thing. And yeah, it's cool sometimes to see your things represented, to see your books or your comics represented exactly like you want, but it's almost always going to disappoint you.
Yeah, and I really
because
think that's
you can't
more of
recapture that exact feeling unless you just read the comic.
Exactly, and I really think that's more of a comic book thing, because books is different.
Yeah, books is different.
Because if you take a book and make the Scorch Trials, it's not going to work out well. If you watch the channel, I have an ongoing feud with that series. But, like that it doesn't translate.
Yeah.
Whereas comic books, it's a universe, and like I said, there's a million different stories you can tell. There's 2 civil wars, there's House of M, and like there's so many. They tell the same story like different ways in other times, like they don't even do the same one, like they retell stories in different. I don't know, that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And so I think that just to kind of again hop back into it
we keep getting off,
is that this season I appreciated where they took most of the characters.
Who didn't you appreciate where they took?
I felt like they kind of they stupidified Diego a little bit.
Really?
That was the only thing that I had a bit of a qualm with. I think he did good. I think he was a good character, but I felt like he was a little bit dumber this season.
He might have been a little bit dumber, but I also think that he to me was one of the like headliners this season.
Yeah, he was, for sure.
He really took a front seat and was like, I really like that because he's my favorite out of all of them. I do really think, I feel like they really benched Luther this season, which I don't necessarily know how I feel. Like I don't really care that they did that. Like he was there and he was helping, but he didn't really do anything.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the only thing with me is that, and yes, he was pretty upfront last season, but like I don't know, he really didn't do anything this season.
Yeah, he didn't do all that much, and he was sort of the joke of this.
Yeah, which
season.
I don't hate, because in the comic books, if you've read Dallas, you know what happens to him there, and there was some references to that
eggs
in this season, which I thought was funny. But I would have liked to see more like power stuff from him,
Yeah.
like you see it in the opening sequence when he's like blocking rockets and stuff and throwing guys, but I would have liked to see that more. Like it seemed like when Diego's stuck under the tractor, he struggled to lift that up. Like he should have just lifted that up with one hand.
Yeah, exactly. I think that Luther is a little bit useless when like he's just kind of as strong as a really strong human. Like
it really seems like
he should be a lot stronger than he is.
Yeah,
it would.
Well,
seem.
like yeah, and this was kind of something that I've thought since the first season, and then I thought it again in this season, because in the first season he fights Hazel and it's just kind of like equal.
Yeah,
and I was like, there's no way, this is like Mr. Incredible fighting some guy,
Yeah,
some big
big
guy, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
And so, like, it's just kind of strange, you know? And then it happened again this season where he's a bare knuckle boxer fighting guys, and they did use it where he's just kind of like playing with them, then he'll uppercut them to the moon.
Yeah.
But with that, like, with the last fight he had, he's just like, I'm sad. Punch me to death. Like, I feel like, I don't know, like,
And like he did throw it away.
he threw it away, but he shouldn't be able to be beaten by punches, even if he's just standing there.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be able to do anything to him, you know.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think
it's actually kind of the same what they did to Mr. Incredible in the second movie, where it's like, here's a giant brick man who's just stronger, stronger than the guy whose superpowers being strong.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
that was so stupid. But
I don't know. And so that was kind of the thing. I think we also found ourselves screaming at Luther a lot of the time of like, I hate you. You're the dumbest person, just because of a lot of the dumb choices he made.
Yeah.
And out of anyone, though, you say that they dumbed down Diego. I think they dumbed down Luther because he was a moron.
He was a lot
the
stupider,
entire time.
Yeah.
When he's with the 2 5s, he's just like, the gorilla body went to his brain. Like, he has no anything at that point, you know?
Yeah, I can agree
something
with
that I would like them to take, I think this is actually a good way that we can take this now, is we'll talk about the characters a bit and where we'd like to see them go. Is that for the next season going forward, I would like to see Luther kind of reinvigorate himself, where he takes his place as the leader.
Exactly.
You know, where he's like
that as well.
where truly he's like, we see why he's number one, you know, where he can give them a nice speech and like, yeah, we're doing it. Because all we've seen so far is Diego should be number one. Because even in the season 1 where he's like, I have a plan. What's the plan? We will go to the Icarus Theater. And they're all just kind of like,
yeah, and I don't know.
You know, like we haven't seen why he's the leader yet.
And I don't know if it's necessarily Diego who should take up.
No, and I don't know that there is, because that is
position.
part of his thing. It's, we talked about a lot while watching it. It's the Raphael and Leonardo dynamic between those two, where they're feuding and kind of butting heads. Where yeah, you know?
Yeah, but I do agree is that even throughout season 1, carrying over into season 2. Luther is sort of just always treated by the rest of them as this joke, you know, like nobody actually, like, he's always like, guys, I am the leader, and they're when like, in reality, they're like, and everyone just laughs at him, you know, and so it would be cool to see him do something worthy or at least say something worthy and sort of lead them, you know, exactly. Like that would, I think that would be really good.
I do think that we might get more of a descent from him before we get a rise, though, because
this was a pretty low season for him.
It's true, but in the comic books, I'm going to spoil the comic books a bit here, so if you haven't seen it, just skip a little bit forward, is in the comic books, they, like, Endgame Thored him. He got super fat, and he just hung out and was just, like, eating and eating and eating, and so that was the reference that they talked about in the... that we talked about, that they were referencing to, that he was just eating all season and it was just sad. And so I think I kind of think two things, is that either it's going to continue with that and we'll get Endgame Thor Luther where he gets really fat and then has to redeem himself, or this was just the reference to it and then we'll get his rise, because there's not a lot lower he can go from this season, because he was just sad and just, I don't know, he's just kind of this goof.
Yeah, exactly. And it would be good to see his worth.
Yeah.
You know, as
because
at least part of the team. If he's not going to step up as the leader, then he at least needs to like do some good stuff.
Yeah. And I think we will see everyone shine with us now facing another academy. And we'll talk about that more later, I think.
Yeah.
Is there other characters we want to talk about?
I think that, speaking of kind of screaming at people in frustration, Allison has the power to, like, do anything. And I get that it's like,
that's her thing.
I want to be, I don't want to rely on that. but sometimes like
Sometimes
use
you just gotta
sometimes
do
you
it.
just gotta use
When
it.
your
Like
husband
there were
is being
times
beaten to death,
and she did end up
use
using
it there,
but there were
why
other
didn't
times
you use it 10 minutes
yeah,
earlier?
and there were other times when people are getting like when she's in a fight and she just won't use it.
And I think the reason for that is that they don't want her to be overpowered, because she would be, but maybe not, because in the last fight where I think you're referring to is, had she just blasted Lila immediately, it would have solved a lot of problems instead of her trying to kung fu her.
Yeah.
You know, where but
and when the Swedes attacked them in their house, it was not until the last part of the fight, and like he throat chopped
which
her,
was good. I like
which
that.
was good, and that's good use of she can't immediately just rumor him, but like just there were so many times that season where it's like, Allison, like,
and they
just use your power
by spreading them out in the timeline. They allowed it so that she could talk this season, because that would be a huge pain if this character can't talk to everyone. But in the whole second comic, she still can't talk, you know? And so that was their way of nerfing her, you know? So then we don't have this giant overpowered problem. And so I just think, like, utilize Allison and Luther more, you know? And,
the one thing I didn't like when Allison did utilize her powers was at the beginning
faces.
in that awesome, which was awesome, by the way. I really liked
really
the way
liked
that
too.
kicked
That was
off.
one of my favorite season openings that I've seen.
The first battle. But she just says, like, I heard a rumor, I blew your minds. And then their heads just explode.
I think it
and
should have been...
I don't think, like, then they could have, like, maybe shot themselves.
Yeah,
or,
either shot themselves or they, like, have an aneurysm.
Yeah, like, I don't think that their heads should just vaporize. Because then, like it should be within the confines
of what someone can do.
Exactly. You know,
because
like,
she can't say,
if
I heard a rumor you could fly, and now I can fly.
Exactly. Like, that's the rule that they've now set for themselves. Like, if I can't sit down and physically melt my face. Exactly. Yeah. And so she could essentially say to Luther, I heard a rumor that you were
useful,
even stronger. Or to Five, say, I heard a rumor that you could teleport perfectly through time. Yeah. You know? Yeah. So that first one I didn't like, because that's not within the confines of what a human can do to themselves. Yeah.
And that was what I was going to say. And that's, again, another way to not have her be overpowered. But now it's not, because they did that. Yeah. You know? Because,
like, it's the opposite of what they should be looking to do to Allison, because the problem with Allison's character is very similar to issues in writing with Captain Marvel. Because she's just so powerful that how do you write conflict for a character like that? Yeah. You know, that's why she, like, I would have loved to have seen her a lot more in Endgame, but instead they had to go, well, she's got business on other planets, so she can't come on the main mission.
Which I understand why
she would have just done it all.
For story-wise, you know?
If she was a little bit less powerful, she could take way more of a forefront in the story. She could have been a part of the team. Like, why wasn't she an Avenger in Avengers Endgame?
She was. She showed up.
Only in the end. She showed up, right? You know, so, and it's similar for Allison. She can play more interesting roles if she can't blow up people's brains by asking them to, right? Yeah. I really liked what Five was doing this season.
Yeah, Five I like. And that's probably the biggest change from the comics for me, actually, is that I didn't care at all for Five in the comics. I was just kind of like, he was just none of the kind of like quirk and like I don't know, not necessarily redeeming qualities, but like just like the charm, the charm. He didn't have any. Well, maybe he did, but to me he didn't in the comics. But he's fun in the show, you know. It's like I like to watch what he's doing.
Yeah, and like anytime Five is setting up the thing he's about to do, I'm always like, ooh, I can't wait to see this. Yeah. The one thing I like as much as the massacre of the board was like this cool and interesting little adventure, when he said he had to assassinate the board, I was really kind of excited for maybe a bit more of an extended montage of him taking out these people as an expert assassin instead of just taking an axe and massacring them. And it was still good and awesome and cool, but I might have liked to see his skills as an assassin there implemented. And like that's what really got me excited when she was like, I want you to assassinate the board. I was like, oh man, this is going to be cool. 5 is going to be... And I didn't know how long he was going to be gone for, because I assumed that she was going to provide him with a case like she did, so that he could go and take as long as he needed to eliminate the board. That would have been cool. And I thought that might have been something cool, but it was still cool. I'm not too disappointed about that. That's just something that I had a thought about when it was first mentioned.
I would like to see him kind of get better at his teleporting so that he doesn't keep running out. And again though, but I do like that because like it limits him. And so he's not just like pew, 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 pew. But I would like to see him not run out as quick maybe.
Yeah.
So where like him and Diego are about to die and he can't get them to the house.
Yeah.
I would like a bit more.
Yeah. And
it also seems kind of selective on when he's tired.
Yeah, you know? Exactly. It's
like
a bit
he has a
plot
giant fight
there
with himself, but then can't get
and that
him and Diego
honestly that fight to me was a little bit lackluster. The way they were just kind of pop, and now I punch you, and then I thought
it was good.
Flips away.
And I like the utilization of like not being able to see them and then filling in the gaps and what's going on, and also I think it was good. I think it was acceptable because of the psychosis that was going on.
Yeah.
Had they been both in like prime condition, I don't think that it would have been a very acceptable
fight.
Like
it was just kind of punch,
yeah,
kick, miss, punch. Like it was kind of, and it was in slow motion, but I might have liked, like the first fight that we have with 5 in season 1 is really cool because he's teleporting behind people, using them to his advantage because he's so small and just kind of like, I like that kind of 5 fight style, and that like some stuff a little bit faster because he can move faster than anybody else. Yeah. So I would like fight scenes like that, in the future. But otherwise, I really like 5's character. I like that he's this surly young man, as it were, and that like. That he still cares about his family, and that I like that part.
I feel like
no matter how mad
that was
he
lost
is,
in the comic.
Yeah, and no matter how mad he is and how much he threatens that he will murder Diego himself, he had the opportunity to leave with the first case when he wanted them to show up, and he chucked it away.
Yeah.
Like he purposefully stayed because he knew that if he left, the others would not find a way out.
Yeah.
I think that. I always liked Klaus. I think that
Klaus is always fun.
That his stuff was good. I like that they brought Ben kind of into the main circle a little bit more.
I think we kind of hoped that through the time travel of some strange twist that Ben would actually be there. But they established very quickly that he wasn't, and so that was fine.
Yeah.
And I liked the possession stuff was all fun. And it's just kind of jolly jaunts with those guys.
Yeah. And I think it was I was kind of sad that Ben had to like fully die.
Yeah.
Before he and he did for a good purpose.
It was good. It reminded me of Infinity War.
And it was sad and
it was very sad.
I just kind of wish that he got to be around longer is the only thing, and maybe he will be. And yeah. Ho ho ho. And so, Diego we already touched on a little bit. He was doing good stuff.
Yeah. I saw Gerard had said that he wants to see him use his comic book power of holding his breath as long as he wants, which, fine. We haven't said that he can't do that, but at the same time, it's just kind of like...
Is that really a power? Like, is that a power worth giving somebody?
I don't really need a whale boy.
Yeah.
It's cool, and it would be cool to see him utilize it, but I think what they've done with him in the show is a lot more interesting. And the way that we learn that he can now stop things in the air.
Well, that he can curve anything is his
Yeah.
power, and so that's kind of cool to see him use
Yeah,
that
that was awesome.
on things that he
And
wasn't
I
destroying.
like I like to think that maybe he's thought about trying that and now was just kind of like, all right,
Make
all
or
right,
break moment.
yeah,
Yeah.
you know.
Um,
Did he just say he's gonna blow himself up?
when did they?
in Civil War?
Oh
He's
yeah.
like, yeah.
Yeah. Um, I, I,
And then yeah. So,
and then Vanya
yeah.
as the last one.
I liked it.
I liked it. I think that
Could've done
I
without
really
Harlan.
what I what I really liked about Vanya's arc was that when she was around her siblings, she was just kind of this like happy
Yeah,
little
yeah.
goofball,
I really liked that
and I
too.
really liked that. I liked when they had their meeting with their dad, and they're like, maybe Vanya shouldn't. She's like, I could do it, and
Yeah,
she's just
and
so
just
happy,
exploded
and
the
she's
thing.
so
Yeah, yeah,
happy.
yeah.
And that's
I
what I
really
really
liked that
liked
too.
this season was
Yeah.
that Vanya got to be happy.
Yeah, I really liked
for
her
some of the
character.
time, and I really liked that. Um,
And I'll be honest, where they went with her character this second season was where I was hoping they were going with it in the comics.
Mm,
And so yeah, that was yeah. And so I was quite happy with it.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. In the comics, spoiler alert, this is what I was referring to. At the end, instead of Allison setting off the gun beside her ear to stop her, Five just sneaks up behind her and blows her brains out.
Yeah, which
And
is
it says, at the end it's like Vanya survived, but she never played the violin again. And I'm like, that's cruel, and I hate that, because
Yeah.
this whole time Vanya was the victim.
Yeah.
The entire time she got ambushed and tortured until she did have powers, and then instead of saving her, Five just shot her in the head.
Yeah.
And I hate that.
Yeah.
I don't like that at all. I don't like
it
what that
really,
is.
It really
There's no
makes
morals
a
behind
lot
it.
more sense the way they did it.
Exactly.
In the show.
To save her.
Yeah.
You know? And when it came down to it in this one, what I liked was when they were all about to make the same mistake, when she was like, I gotta go get my new family, then none of them were gonna go with her, but then they all did, because they're a family, and that's what they need to do to help and to
I like
fix
that.
Vanya.
I feel like that's where it's going, is where we're a team now, you know,
Yeah.
where everyone's just got each other's back.
Exactly.
As much as they're always annoyed by each other,
Mhm.
the camaraderie is actually starting to be there.
Yeah, and it like that's what I hated about the comics, was that it didn't seem like anybody cared.
No.
It didn't seem like anybody cared that Five just killed her. They were all like, yeah, we did it.
We did
Good
it.
job. You know? Like, nobody gave a crap. And that's why I was like, that's where it seemed like it was starting to go by the end of the last season. It seems like they were regrettable about it, but they didn't really care if it came down to killing her. And that's why I like that now they're seeing that they need to be good people and
Yeah.
be a family, you know?
Yeah.
And yeah, with the only part Kieran mentioned that we could have done without Harlan, I don't mind the kid.
Yeah.
The only part of it that I didn't love was that Vanya was able to pass on powers to him.
That was kind of
and
strange.
that was a little bit weird. Like, not that it was
can't happen,
not that it
because
can
we don't know
happen,
how the alien magic works.
but we don't know how it works.
Exactly.
And so I was unsure about what the connotations would be, and that he got to like keep some powers. I thought that was a little bit weird
Suspicious.
and suspicious, and who
Um,
knows?
I also basically the last character I kind of want to touch on is that I really liked Lila
Mm.
throughout the thing. I thought that was a really fun character. I liked when she was just crazy. I thought that was a fun character to have around,
Yeah.
especially around Diego, who's always kind of brooding and trying to
Yeah.
be serious.
Mhm.
To have this kind of goof with him, I
Yeah.
thought was a really fun
Dynamic.
The only thing with her is that I would like to see kind of the not the confines, but the parameters of her powers.
Of her polymorph.
You know,
like, kind of
is
power.
she kind of like Rogue, or is it a Jack thing going on?
No, I think she
I
can
do
mimic
think that she's
powers.
I think that she's a mimic too, but they didn't say that ever.
Yeah.
You know, Klaus said it, but then for some reason they made Allison question it, and that's why I go, well, why did we do that? Because had Klaus just gone, and it seems like she can only do one of our powers at a time, and then everyone goes, yeah. But in the show, Klaus says it, and then Allison goes, you sure about that? And so then I go, well, is that her power?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I don't know. That's why I want them to clearly lay out
and
what's
I
going
think
on.
the only reason she said that was to be like, do you really want to rely on that?
Yeah,
was kind of the implication. But I get what you're saying is that it's just kind of confusing to be like, this is what it is, and for a
To have
character
someone
to be
question
like,
it.
is that what it is? It's like,
That
well,
makes
is
me
it? That the
question it.
audience goes, well, is it then?
Exactly, and that was kind of questionable to me. But yeah, I really like the character. I hope that they use her more.
Yeah, I was really skeptical before I knew what was going on in that fight. When she was just another Vanya, I was like, oh no.
At first,
no.
I was like, yeah, when that first happened, I was
Absolutely
like,
not. I was
what?
like, please no. Like that takes away everything that is special about them. But now that she can mimic them,
Yeah.
I'm okay with it.
And I do think they'll utilize a lot more, and I think we'll transition here in the next season when there's going to be a lot more powers in play. At least we think, because so
what we do see is that when they get back, and maybe I'll just go into something really quick that we're gonna make probably another video about.
yeah,
So we're not gonna touch on it too much. Is that when they get back to the
Or-
restored timeline, they see the Sir Reginald Hargreaves. He says, I thought you'd turn up eventually.
yeah,
And then they turn around and he's like, oh, this is the Sparrow Academy. And Ben is there, alive and well.
And we see a bunch of shadow
silhouettes of what could be their own versions, but are more likely
others. Yeah, and I think, like you said, I think that we're gonna have kind of a theory video about that, because we've got some speculation and how that kind of came into fruition.
Yeah, which is that the only thing that I will mention right now is that the time travel of this season is one thing that was a little bit hairy.
I think that's going to be a different video.
Yeah, exactly. No, what I'm saying is
Okay,
that you can get into your theory in this video, but I'm not going to get into the time travel.
Oh,
too
you want
much
to talk
in
about the
this one.
sparrows in
Yeah,
this one?
sure.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that
Never mind what I said before. Then.
the time travel, they didn't really fully put forward a set of rules, which isn't always the worst thing, but it means inevitably somebody like me is going to
It means
nitpick
we're
it.
going to question it, and within the next 2 weeks are going to have a video about theory and
Yeah.
figuring out the time travel.
And so it was, they messed with a lot of things in the past. Some things they seemed to address at the end. Some things they just didn't address. Is it a multiverse? Is it one timeline? That was a bit unclear.
Watch our video to find out.
That's going to be something we're going to talk about in a
and
little
so
bit more depth. It
no
wasn't
matter
the
what
cleanest, is all I'm going to say here.
And so,
But it was more about the story.
Yeah.
It was more about time travel fitting the story than about the story fitting any rules of time travel.
which is okay if you're if you're sacrificing certain scientific things to serve the story.
Scientific.
I can respect that. The story comes first,
Yeah.
And so with that, where it kind of ended up, we have this new academy, and so yeah, I pondered whether this would be a different video, but we'll talk about it here. Is that first off, we think Sparrow Academy because at the end you see Harland has the now power of float object in hand, and he's holding his little bird toy, which Sparrow. And yeah, and so we're guessing that he's now going to have some sort of connection with Hargreaves, He's going to be a powered boy and hopefully older and a bit less annoying.
Well, like, not that he was annoying, but like the character is a challenging person to deal with in the universe.
That's what I'm what I mean.
And so it's, when they have to calm him down or go and find him, it's like, man,
I wish that we could be dealing with this right now, but we have to save you.
Exactly. We have to deal with other problems right now, but we got to save this kid. And there's nothing wrong with saving the kid.
No.
You got to save the kid. I want you to save the kid.
Exactly.
But
I know that there's other things going on.
Exactly.
And that's what they want you to feel.
Exactly. And so they were effective in that.
Yeah. And so he's going to have some sort of connection with Hargreaves, and so Basically, kind of my theory.
Yeah,
is,
and what kind of the catalyst to this is the first thing Hargreaves says when they get back is, I knew you would show up sooner or later.
Yeah. I thought you'd come eventually or something,
Yeah.
he says. And so this timeline, again, I don't want to touch on the timelines too much because we're going to have a video about that, but this timeline is the same one that they were in 1963. You know, and that 1963, after them being there, is not the same 1963 as they were in that originally happened in their timeline. And so in this timeline, this coincides with that. Hargreaves and Harlan continued, and this is the academy that we now have.
Yeah, because of what they did, because of what they told Hargreaves, and because they had meetings with him. And such.
So with that, we now have this new academy. The only person from that academy that we know is Ben. Everyone else, we don't necessarily know. You could speculate that it is them from this timeline, but I don't think it is. And I've got reasoning. And not only do I have my theory about it, but I think had it been them, it would have showed it.
Yeah.
I think had the rest of them been the same, they would have showed us. And I think they shadowed them so that it's like, big mystery, who was it?
Yeah.
And I think the reason for this in-universe is that Reginald met them. And so he's gone through it already. The Umbrella Academy went back in time, met him before he made the academy, and so now he's looking at these guys, thinking that they're failures, and realizing that these are not the kids that he wants. And so now, when he goes through the timeline again, he makes sure not to pick those same guys. And the reason that Ben is there is because he didn't meet Ben when they were there. And so that is just kind of you see that that was kind of a
that was the thought process.
That's his thought process. Ben was one of the ones he picked last time, and so since he didn't meet Ben as a failure this time, he picked him because
again.
he would have picked.
He wasn't actively avoiding Ben like he was actively avoiding the other ones.
And so because he would have found his list of powered people. He went through and said, "I want these 1 through 7," but now this time he went, "Okay, I'm dropping these 6, and so I'll take this from Ben on." Basically.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the theory, is that these will be different powered kids, and I think that'll be a very interesting thing to deal with, especially if we're bringing Lila back, to have somebody to take all their powers to. Another thing that I was just kind of thought was an interesting thing visually is that we kept referring them to these other people, the Sparrow Academy, as the evil versions of them. And because that's kind of just what you do, you know? There's a new timeline, there's a different academy, this is the evil versions of them, you know?
Yeah.
It's evil Ben, where he's got these scars and bad
emo
haircut. And so
it's
I thought that was funny.
Ben.
Yeah, and so I thought that was an interesting thing, that we're saying that we think this is the evil versions. But visually, if you look at it, Ben comes out and he's got his academy shirt on, and it's got color on it. I think it's got red on there. And then you look at our original timeline guys, and they've got all black and like grungy, and they look evil, you know? And so I thought that was a funny kind of switch where we're following the evil versions because these guys suck. It's been proven over and over again that our guys are jerks, and they annoy each other, and it's just like they're dysfunctional. And I thought that was really funny twist, where it's like maybe the timeline that we're now in is the better timeline.
Yeah.
Because not only they've got the colors and our guys suck, but clearly Reginald did it differently because that academy stayed together.
Yeah, exactly.
And like they stayed there because Ben is the same age as those guys now, but they're still there.
Yeah, and I think other kind of hints of that is that Ben's hair isn't, you know, what you would traditionally call like, you know, neatly done up, like he had to do like when he was younger, and like all of them kind of had to keep, you know, tidy hair. And in this one it looks like maybe he has a little bit more liberty
and personality.
And so maybe Reginald learned,
and he's cursing in the house.
Yeah,
he
and he's
says,
cursing
"Dad,
in the
who
house."
the hell are these guys?
Yeah, and you wouldn't think that that Reginald would usually
that.
allow that,
Yeah.
but
because he yelled at Five when Five was cursing at the table before he time traveled.
yeah, and so maybe he gave them more liberty. He gave them more, more of a life that a kid would deserve.
Yeah.
And so maybe this is actually the better academy, and like who are actually an effective group, and maybe not, but because maybe they lacked a robo mom, or maybe they got a real mom. Like those are things that are unclear because Grace left him because of directly because of things that Diego said.
Diego did, yeah.
And we don't know. There's still missing pieces there. How Grace ended up either becoming or being rebuilt as Robot Grace.
And I think that probably will be explained.
Yeah, and maybe Pogo's back too. I love seeing back. Pogo. He looks great all the time.
Yeah.
And I think that those are just some interesting thoughts that we had in regards to the ending. Is that Reginald went back and tried to fix his mistakes.
Yeah,
potentially
the mistakes that he hadn't made yet.
That's the implication that we got from it. Is that he, having a glimpse at what he did, having a glimpse at his potential mistakes, went, okay, not gonna grab those guys because they suck, and this time I'm gonna start fresh with new kids that I didn't see there, and I'm going to give them more freedom, more liberty, because by giving them tight restraints, they lashed out and became bad. So now I'm going to give them a little bit more freedom, and maybe end up with some Sparrow Academy. Harlan is there somewhere. Like, he had some hand in it. Maybe he's dead. He'd be older by that point.
Not any older than Hargreaves.
Yeah, exactly. But Hargreaves is an alien still.
Yeah,
we knew that.
We knew that from the comic books. That shot
and from
of him,
the first
season, we see him on Crazy Planet.
Yeah.
And the shot of him laying his face mask on the chair is basically identical to a comic book image that there is in the first book, which is in like the second page. So if it's kind of this giant reveal, and it kind of outs who's read the comic book and who hasn't by who's like, oh my god, he's an alien, Well, where it's like, we knew there was something weird about him from the first season, but now it's like, alien. Literally in the second page of the comic book, it says he's an alien. He's a magic entrepreneur, Olympic medalist, blah blah blah. Not magic, but like all these titles: millionaire, billionaire, guy,
and then the next
and space alien.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
it's got the face mask on the thing, and it's just kind of like when that happened, I went, oh yeah, I knew that.
Yeah,
and I just thought that's kind of fun.
Yeah.
Should the Sparrow Academy be kind of bad? They're the
or at least there'll be some sort of misunderstanding,
and that's what I was trying to say. The what's the word? What's the hero and villain words?
Foil?
No.
Bad guy?
Well,
Good
the
guy?
Bad guy. The fancy ones of this is our hero. Why can't I think of this word?
I don't know what you're trying to say.
In a story, the good guy is this and the bad guy is that.
The protagonist
and antagonist. Okay, I don't know why I couldn't think of that. I use them all the time. But the antagonist will be the Sparrow Academy for some reason, Not necessarily evil, but they are opposing our Umbrella Academy.
Yeah.
And that's why I wanted to use that word. And so I think if that is the case, I think it'll be very interesting to see powered fights where maybe we've got this kung fu guy or like this guy that can do this. That would be a really cool fight for Diego, or somebody who's pretty strong, or like somebody like Five who's very fast who can fight Luther, And I just thought that would be very interesting because just kind of, for me, a final point that I wanted to talk about is, and this will be probably a podcast for another time entirely, is I'm not saying that this is what they did here, but me and Aiden were talking about
maybe a little
the other day. It's maybe a little bit what they did here is that for some reason we're getting the feeling that people, that at least the people creating things, have the sense that people watching it don't want a giant pitched battle. When in reality, I always want a giant pitched battle.
Yeah.
You know, obviously, I want emotional stakes and thought-provoking things to be going on.
Yeah.
But I think that a giant fight is a great way to physically represent that,
yeah.
you know? And like
And
we see that
for them to like have this huge army and they get shot at a little bit, but then Vanya just blasts them all out, and then they fight. Then they have an individual fight with Lila. But I would have loved for her to knock them back so that the agents now have lost their guns.
Yeah.
And so then they all just kind of charge at them and have this big battle.
And as much as I would have liked to have Diego fighting the army, what they should have done then is what I hate kind of saying like
They should have done
this is what I would have done.
Yeah.
But I think a potential option there would have been Vanya blasts it. The army kind of gets up, maybe don't have their guns now. Diego and Five fight Lila, and the rest of them fight the army. You know, so now we have our more individualized fight, but everyone else is also doing something.
Yeah.
You know, and then
Something
maybe they
like
take
that.
out the army, and then we have our talk with Lila, because I really like that, and I thought that was a very good moment. But yeah, and so that's kind of just what I wanted to touch upon, is just that I always want a big fight, you know? I would love to see the Academy having a giant brawl.
And you can show Luther just chucking guys.
And I think
like he's strong.
And honestly, I think that was part of what made that intro sequence so awesome, was because it's like, this is what I want, you know? And I think that's part of the reason why they didn't feel the need to give us that giant fight at the end, because they for the story they wanted other things, and so at the beginning, here's what you wanted, here's the big fight. The other thing is that what was I going to say? Partially of what I was going to say is that maybe that's kind of what we'll get with the Sparrows, is we'll get big fight scenes with the Umbrellas and the Sparrows, that we've got these super fights of cool long sequences. Not that we didn't get great fights throughout the season.
You probably just leave it.
But yeah, and so I think the big fight would have been fun.
Yeah. I don't think I have anything else to say on this podcast. I
did have something else. You keep going though.
But yeah, overall I enjoyed watching it. And like, some shows are hard to get into, and you know when you're not really into it. But I always love when shows just kind of suck you in and you want to see what happens next.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason we binged it.
Yeah, and this one did that for me personally, and yeah, it was real good.
I can't think of what I was gonna say. I'll maybe I'll mention it in the review or another video, or maybe in our next podcast if I think of it. But yeah, again, like Aiden said, I really liked it. I thought it was good. I'm excited to see where the next season goes. Yeah, it was good.
I think if you think of it while I'm doing the outro, just holler. But thanks for sticking around. If you did, consider giving us a subscription, a like.
We're trying
Let
to
us
grow
know
the
what
channel.
you think of our ideas. We love interacting with commenters. And so, yeah, just let us know what you think is really what I want to know. And
yeah, I want to see kind of what other people are thinking about this show.
And about the ending and everything. And
yeah, I've seen a couple, like, not reviews, but, like, kind of ratings of it, and lots of people have thought it's very good. And so I'm interested to see what the mass majority of people are thinking about it.
Yeah. Well, that's all for me.
Yeah.
If you didn't think of
I didn't
what
think
you
of
wanted
it,
to say.
but I'll say it on the next podcast probably.
Okay.
So thanks for watching.
See you in the next one.